After a fight, she yelled loud enough for the whole apartment complex to hear, "He's not even a real man, he just pays my rent." Neighbors peeked out from their doors while she kept going. I just sat there silent. 2 weeks later, she showed up begging for a place to stay. The argument itself was stupid, forgettable. It was about something I'd said, or the way I'd said it, I don't even remember. What I do remember is the volume. We were in our apartment, my apartment, and the windows were open on a warm Tuesday evening. My girlfriend, Clara, wasn't just yelling at me, she was performing for an audience. Her voice escalated until she was practically screaming, and then she threw open the front door to the hallway of our building. "You want to know what the problem is?" she yelled into the open space, ensuring every one of our neighbors could hear. "The problem is that he's not even a real man. He's just a wallet, that's all he is to me. He just pays my rent." Doors creaked open down the hall. I could see Mrs. Gable from 3B peeking out, her face a mask of concern. Mr. Anderson from across the hall was pretending to check his mail. Clara stood there, hands on her hips, tears of rage streaming down her face, soaking in the attention. She kept going, listing my supposed failures as a man, each sentence punctuated with the fact that my only value was the money I provided. I didn't move from the couch. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I just sat there watching her, my face a complete blank. My silence wasn't shock or weakness. It was the calm that comes when a chaotic situation simplifies itself with absolute clarity. In my line of work, you learn to tune out the noise and focus on the objective. And in that moment, as she publicly defined our relationship as a simple financial transaction, the objective became crystal clear. The contract was in breach. It was time to terminate the agreement and liquidate the assets. Let's get one thing straight. I am not a simp. I'm a logistics consultant. I spent 10 years in the military planning the movement of personnel and materials in and out of hostile environments. My entire life is about assessing risk, creating efficient systems, and executing plans with precision. I don't go with the flow. I create the flow. I met Clara 6 months ago. She was vibrant, exciting, and a complete departure from my structured life. I knew what she was about. Her life was a curated series of social events and expensive hobbies with no visible means of support. But I was curious. I saw her as a logistical puzzle. I wanted to see how her system worked. So we started dating. 3 months in, she was unexpectedly forced out of her apartment. The story was full of holes, but I let it slide. I made her a proposal, framed as a contract. I told her I was looking for a partner, not a dependent. I offered her a deal. She could move into my apartment for a probationary period of 3 months. I would cover all the major bills. Her role was to actively find a stable job and contribute to building a genuine partnership. At the end of the 3 months, we would reassess. If she had a job and we were building something real, we would sign a new lease together. If not, we would part ways. No hard feelings. It was a clear, defined, short-term investment to see if there was any real potential. It was not a blank check for life. Her outburst in the hallway was her 2-month performance review, and she had failed spectacularly. She hadn't just failed to meet the terms, she had publicly announced that she had no intention of ever meeting them. So, as she finally ran out of steam and slammed the door, breathing heavily as if she'd just run a marathon, I didn't engage. I just picked up my laptop from the coffee table, opened a word processor, and started typing. She stared at me, confused. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Aren't you going to say anything?" I didn't look up from the screen. "I am documenting the termination of our agreement," I said, my voice perfectly level. I continued typing. After a few minutes, I hit print. The printer in my office whirred to life. I walked in, grabbed the single sheet of paper, and walked back to the living room. I handed it to her. It was a formal, legally sound 30-day notice to vacate the premises, citing our verbal agreement and the date. Her face went from anger to confusion to disbelief. "What is this? Is this a joke?" "Our arrangement was transactional," I said, echoing the words she had screamed in the hallway. "You have just publicly declared the terms. I am now formally closing the account. You have 30 days to move your things and vacate my property. I will expect you to be gone by noon on the final day." Then I walked into my bedroom and closed the door, leaving her standing alone with the consequences of her own words. Update 1. The 24 hours after the transaction, as I now call it, were a masterclass in emotional whiplash from Clara. She went through every stage of manipulation: tears, apologies, screaming, threats, and finally, sullen silence. I ignored it all. I slept in the spare room. The next morning, I left for work before she woke up. My plan was already in motion. My first call was to my landlord, Mr. Davies. I preempted whatever story Clara was inevitably going to spin. I explained that my girlfriend, who was a permitted guest but not on the lease, had caused a significant public disturbance the previous evening. I informed him that I had terminated the relationship and had already provided her with a formal, written 30-day notice to vacate. I assured him that I would handle her removal professionally and that the situation was under control. Mr. Davies, who values quiet and order above all else, was audibly relieved and thanked me for being proactive. Narrative control secured. Next, I dealt with the neighbors. I caught Mrs. Gable on her way out to walk her dog. I apologized sincerely for the noise. I calmly explained, "My girlfriend and I have ended our relationship. She will be moving out at the end of the month. I apologize again that you had to witness that." She gave me a sympathetic pat on the arm and said, "Young man, you don't have to explain." We all heard what she said. Good for you. Local support established. Back at the apartment, the atmosphere was icy. Clara was not speaking to me, but she was communicating loudly with her best friend, a toxic enabler named Jessica. I could hear her on the phone in her room, wailing about how I was a cold-hearted monster, how I'd thrown her out for no reason. This was expected. It was part of her operational playbook. Phase 2 of my plan was about creating an airtight firewall. I logged into every account we shared. Her access to my Amazon Prime, my grocery delivery service, my credit cards where she was an authorized user. All of it was revoked with a series of clicks. Our relationship had been defined as me paying her rent. I was now ensuring that was the only thing I was paying for, and only for the next 30 days, as legally required. The first test of the firewall came that Friday. I came home from work to find Clara and Jessica sitting on my couch surrounded by shopping bags. They gave me triumphant, smug looks. "We had a little retail therapy," Clara announced, holding up a bag from a designer store. "Don't worry, I put it on my card." She meant my card, of course. She just didn't know her access had been cut. I just nodded. "I hope you had fun," I said, and went to my room. A few hours later, I heard Clara shrieking. I walked out to see her staring at her phone, her face pale. Jessica was looking over her shoulder. "My card was declined trying to order dinner," she yelled at me. "All of them? What did you do?" "I have removed you as an authorized user from my accounts," I said calmly. "Our agreement was that I would pay your rent. It did not include a clothing allowance or a dinner budget. The transaction is limited to housing for the next 26 days. Jessica stepped forward. "You can't just cut her off like that. That's financial abuse." "Financial abuse," I repeated, looking her dead in the eye, "is a serious accusation. What would you call a relationship where one person publicly states the other person's only value is as a source of money? I'd call that exploitation. I am simply ending the exploitation. If you are concerned for your friend's financial welfare, I'm sure you'll be happy to cover her expenses." Jessica's mouth snapped shut. Her loyalty to Clara was directly proportional to how much fun my money could provide. Without it, she was just an annoying roommate. The following week was a war of attrition. Clara clearly believed this was a power play, that I was just trying to punish her and would eventually cave. She made no effort to pack or look for a new place. Instead, she escalated. She started having friends over on weeknights, being loud, leaving messes, trying to provoke a reaction. I didn't react. I bought noise-canceling headphones. I hired a weekly cleaning service and sent Clara an invoice for half the cost, which she laughed at. I just filed it away. The smear campaign also began in earnest. Jessica and Clara's other friends started posting vague, dramatic stories on social media about toxic men and wolves in sheep's clothing. They were trying to paint me as the villain. I didn't engage. My own social media is a barren wasteland used only for professional networking. Their attacks were landing in an empty field. The true genius of my plan, however, was what I was doing in the background. Clara thought she had a month to figure things out. She was wrong. She had a month until she was legally required to leave, but her ability to stay was contingent on her behavior. I had my lawyer draft a second document, a notice of lease violation for creating a public nuisance and hosting unauthorized, disruptive gatherings. I documented every party, every mess with dates and photos. I didn't need to use it yet. It was a contingency, a trump card, ready to be played if she forced my hand. They thought this was a game of emotion. I was the only one who understood it was a game of legal chess. And I was already 3 moves ahead. Update 2. The final 10 days of the 30-day notice were when reality finally began to dawn on Clara. The money had run out. Her friends, including Jessica, had stopped coming over once it became clear the free ride was over. The apartment was no longer a fun party spot. It was a tense cohabitation with a man who treated her like a stranger. She tried a new tactic: seduction. She started wearing the outfits I liked, making my favorite meals, trying to remind me of the good times. It was like watching a bad actress play a role she didn't understand. The person she was pretending to be never really existed. I remained polite, distant, and unmoved. The deadline was non-negotiable. With 1 week to go, she finally had a full-blown meltdown. "I'm not leaving," she screamed at me. "You can't make me. I have rights." "You're right," I said, not looking up from my book. "I can't physically make you leave. But on the 1st of the month, at 12:01 p.m., if you are still here, I will have the police escort you out for trespassing, and the landlord will begin formal eviction proceedings, which will destroy your credit and ability to rent another apartment for years. But yes, you do have the right to choose that option." That's when she finally started making calls. Not to find an apartment, but to find a place to crash. I could hear her on the phone, her voice getting more and more desperate. Jessica, apparently, was going on a month-long trip to Europe she couldn't possibly cancel. Another friend had her parents visiting. Another just didn't have the space. Her network of friends, built on the shallow ground of social opportunism, offered her no support whatsoever. They were liabilities in her life, not assets. On the final day, the day she was supposed to be out, she had done almost nothing. A few half-hearted attempts at packing were visible in her room. She spent the morning crying. I had already scheduled a deep cleaning service for 1 p.m. and a locksmith for 3 p.m. The timeline was absolute. At 11:45 a.m., I knocked on her bedroom door. "You have 15 minutes, I said through the door. She flung it open, her face a mess of tears and mascara. "Where am I supposed to go?" she wailed. "That is a logistical problem you have had 30 days to solve," I replied. I handed her a piece of paper. "However, I have taken the liberty of securing a short-term solution for your property." It was the receipt for a storage unit, rented in her name for 1 month. I had also hired a moving crew who were currently waiting in the lobby. "They will be up in 5 minutes, I explained. "They will pack and move all of your belongings to this unit. You can supervise them if you wish. Then you need to leave the key and go." The look of utter defeat on her face was profound. She had no fight left. She had played every card she had, and none of them had worked. The movers were professional and efficient. They cleared out her room in under an hour. Clara just sat on the floor of the empty room, watching. At 12:45 p.m., it was done. Her life in my apartment was packed into a 10 by 10 box a few miles away. The movers left. I stood by the open front door. "It's time to go, Clara," I said. She slowly stood up, walked to the door, and turned. "I hate you," she whispered. "I know," I said. I held out my hand. She dropped her key into it. Then she turned and walked away down the hall, a single purse over her shoulder, with nowhere to go. I closed the door, locked it, and for the first time in 30 days, my home was finally my own. Final update. It's been about a month since Clara left. The 2 weeks of silence I experienced after she walked out that door were the most peaceful I've had in a long time. The deep cleaners came and scrubbed the apartment from top to bottom. The locksmith changed the locks. I rearranged the furniture. I reclaimed my space, piece by piece. The silence was absolute. Then, exactly as the title of this post predicted, she showed up. 2 weeks after I'd last seen her, my buzzer rang. It was her voice small and tinny through the speaker. "Please, can we just talk?" Against my better judgment, I let her up. I wanted to see the final outcome of the project. She looked terrible. She was thinner, her clothes were wrinkled, and the confident, arrogant fire in her eyes was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out exhaustion. She explained that she had been staying with a series of friends, a night here, a couple of nights there. But she had worn out her welcome everywhere. Jessica was still in Europe, ignoring her texts. She had no money, no job prospects, and the storage unit I'd rented for her was due for payment. She was about to lose everything she owned. "I just need a place to stay for a little while," she begged, tears welling in her eyes. "Just until I can get back on my feet, I'll do anything." I let her finish. I didn't interrupt. When she was done, I just looked at her. "No," I said. It was a quiet word, but it had the finality of a steel door slamming shut. "Why are you being like this?" she cried. "I know I messed up." I said I was sorry. "This isn't about you messing up," I explained, my voice devoid of emotion. "This is about you showing me exactly who you are. Do you remember what you yelled in the hallway? You yelled that I wasn't a real man, that I just paid your rent. You defined our relationship as a transaction, Clara. You set the terms. You were providing a certain service, companionship, I suppose, and I was providing a service, financial support. When your service became disrespectful and hostile, the transaction was terminated. It's that simple." "It wasn't a transaction," she sobbed. "I loved you. Your actions proved otherwise." Then I said, "You used that public performance to try and humiliate me, to assert your power over the wallet. But you miscalculated. You failed to realize that a wallet can be closed. You are not entitled to my home, my money, or my time. The account is settled. The transaction is over." I walked to the door and opened it. "I wish you the best of luck in finding a new arrangement that suits you," I said. "Goodbye, Clara." She looked at me for a long moment, searching for any sign of weakness, any crack in my resolve. She found none. She turned and walked out, and I closed the door on that chapter of my life for good. I heard from Mrs. Gable a week later that Clara's parents had to drive in from out of state to collect her and her things from the storage unit. She's apparently moved back home. Her social media has gone dark. The vibrant, exciting puzzle I had once been so curious about had been solved, and the final picture was ugly and sad. My revenge wasn't about yelling back or causing a scene. It was about taking her at her word. She wanted our relationship to be a transaction, so I treated it like one. And when the terms were breached, I simply closed the account, with prejudice. She didn't lose her home because I was cruel. She lost it because she fundamentally misunderstood the terms of her own deal. After a year together, she smirked and said, "I was just using you to make my ex jealous. He finally came back, so we're done." I didn't argue. I even helped her load the boxes into his car and slipped in a little gift she didn't notice. Screenshots of her messages about him. 2 weeks later, she showed up at my door crying that he'd left her. We were just sitting on the couch after dinner, watching some show I can't even remember, and she looked over at me with this weird, satisfied look on her face. After a year together, she just dropped it on me. "I was just using you to make my ex jealous. He finally came back, so we're done." Just like that, I didn't yell. I didn't even really feel surprised. It was more like I'd been hearing a rattling noise in my car for months and the engine finally died. It wasn't a shock, it just confirmed what I already knew deep down. Her ex, David, came up in conversation way too much. She was always cagey about who she was texting, tilting her phone away from me. I'd put the pieces together a long time ago, but I guess I was waiting for her to show her hand. I just didn't expect her to be so proud of it. "Okay," I said. "That's it. Just one word." She looked thrown by that. I think she was expecting a big scene, maybe some begging, something she could use as a final story to tell her friends. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. "So when's he coming to get you?" She blinked and the grin on her face tightened a little. She wasn't in control of the reaction, and it bothered her. "He'll be here in an hour. I've got to pack my stuff." "I'll help," I told her, getting up from the couch. And that's when the plan formed in my head. It wasn't some crazy complicated thing. It was simple, and she was going to help me do it. You see, Sarah was sloppy. She was so sure I was clueless that she'd leave her laptop open on the coffee table when she went to the bathroom. She'd leave her phone lying face up while she was in the kitchen. She was constantly messaging her best friend, Megan, and I saw it all. I wasn't trying to spy. I swear. But she made it impossible not to. A text would pop up on the screen, my name would be in it, and I'd see it out of the corner of my eye. So for the past few months, I'd been taking screenshots. I went into my office while she started throwing her clothes into boxes, not bothering to fold anything. I had a folder on my computer desktop. I just called it Stuff. Inside were dozens of pictures of her chats with Megan. There were the messages where she called David a pathetic loser for still being in love with her after she dumped him. There were the ones making fun of how he wasn't great in bed, with little jokes about his stamina that she clearly thought were hilarious. She mocked his new apartment, calling it a sad little shoebox and saying he probably couldn't afford anything better. But the real gems, the ones that made my stomach turn, were the messages where she laid out her whole plan. Use the nice, stable guy, that's me, to make David jealous enough to take her back. She had a whole timeline. She wrote, "Another 6 months with the boring guy should do it. David is almost at the breaking point." I printed everything. 22 pages of her own words, her own casual cruelty. I put them in a neat stack and slipped them into a plain brown envelope. I didn't even seal it. I wanted it to look like it was just some papers he'd left in his car. When I walked back into the living room, she was humming while taping up a box. She was happy, genuinely happy to be leaving me. I just grabbed a roll of packing tape and started sealing the boxes she'd filled. The silence in the apartment was heavy, but it wasn't awkward. It was just over. An hour later, a horn honked outside. She ran to the window like a kid hearing the ice cream truck. "He's here," she said, grabbing her purse. I picked up the first 2 boxes and headed for the door. "All right, let's get you moved out." David was leaning against a nice-looking car, much nicer than my beat-up truck. He gave me a hard look, trying to look tough. He was the guy who won, in his mind. I didn't care. I wasn't his problem. I was about to do him the biggest favor of his life. We made a few trips back and forth, loading her stuff into his trunk. Sarah was in full-on director mode, telling me to be careful with one box, telling David to shove another one further in. I just played the part of the helpful, compliant ex-boyfriend. On the last trip, I had the lightest box and the envelope tucked under my arm. While David was busy trying to get the last box to fit in his trunk, and Sarah had run back inside to do one last check for her phone charger, I made my move. I walked over to the driver's side door, which he'd left open. David had his back to me, focused on the trunk. I reached in and slid the envelope of papers into the driver's side sun visor. I pushed it up and it was hidden, but I knew he'd find it. It's automatic. The sun gets in your eyes on the drive home. You flip the visor down. It was a ticking time bomb, and the timer had started. I stepped away from the car just as Sarah came bouncing out of the building. She gave me one last look, a mix of pity and dismissal. "No hard feelings, right?" "Nope," I said. "Good luck with everything." She got in the car without another word, and they drove off. I didn't watch them go. I just went back inside my apartment and slid the deadbolt across. It was finally quiet. The next 2 days were all about reclaiming my space. I changed the sheets on the bed, threw out all her half-used toiletries from the bathroom, and rearranged the living room furniture back to the way I liked it. It felt good. The bomb went off 3 days later. I got a friend request on social media from David. I accepted, and a message came through immediately. "Hey, I know this is weird, but can I call you? I need to thank you." I sent him my number, and my phone rang less than a minute later. "Man, thank you," was the first thing he said. He sounded completely stunned. "I found your gift yesterday. Sun was in my eyes on my way home from work. I pulled down the visor, and a ton of papers just fell all over my lap. I pulled over and read every single one. He told me he saw it all. The messages about him being pathetic, the jokes about his apartment, the crude comments about their past, the entire detailed plan to use me to get to him. He said he felt sick to his stomach. He walked inside his apartment, found Sarah unpacking her boxes and humming, and just tossed the papers on the table in front of her. He said she tried to deny it, of course. She said I was a psycho and that I had faked all of it to ruin her life. But he said the messages were so specific, so much in her voice, with details only she would know, that he knew they were real. Then she started crying. She said she only wrote those things because she was hurt and missed him so much. She tried to make it about him, saying he shouldn't believe some papers over her. But he said it wasn't just the insults. It was seeing how calculated and cold she was. He wasn't a person to her. He was an object, a prize to be won back to prove a point. He told her to pack her boxes back up. He said she started screaming then, saying he was ruining their second chance over some stupid messages. He told me he just pointed to the stack of papers and said, "The guy you called a pathetic loser is kicking you out of his sad little shoebox." He actually used her own words against her. He put her boxes in the hallway outside his apartment and told her to call someone to get them. He blocked her number right then and there. "She's not your problem anymore," I told him. "Nope. And I seriously owe you one," he said. "You saved me from a world of trouble." We ended the call on good terms. Two guys who had dodged the same bullet. I felt a sense of closure. The plan had worked perfectly. A few days of peace went by. I was starting to feel normal again. Then, the next wave hit. Sarah's best friend, Megan, started calling me from a blocked number. I didn't answer, so she left a furious voicemail. She called me a manipulative jerk for sabotaging Sarah's happiness. She said Sarah was a wreck, crying on her couch, and that it was all my fault. She finished by saying I needed to fix it. The idea that I was supposed to clean up a mess Sarah made with two different men was just insane. I deleted the message and blocked the number. Of course, that wasn't the end of it. The next escalation was the social media campaign. Megan and Sarah started posting all this vague stuff on their stories, things like, "Some men can't handle seeing a strong woman move on," and "Beware of the toxic ex who tries to ruin your future." They didn't name me directly, but it was obvious who they were talking about. A few of our mutual friends actually bought into it. One of them, a guy named Chris, who I sometimes played poker with, texted me and said he heard I'd been acting crazy and that I should just apologize to her and let it go. I didn't argue with him. I just sent him 3 screenshots. The one where Sarah called David pathetic, the one where she laughed about his shoebox apartment, and the one where she explicitly said, "I'm just using him to make David jealous." Chris texted back about 5 minutes later. "Wow, okay. Never mind. She's nuts. Sorry, man." That was the end of the smear campaign. Facts are stubborn things. Then came the money angle. I knew it was coming. A week after she left, I started getting texts from Megan's phone, but it was obviously Sarah writing them. The first one demanded half of the security deposit for my apartment. This was laughable. I'd lived in my place for 3 years before she moved in. She had never contributed a dime to the deposit. I just replied, "You were never on the lease. This is my apartment. There is no deposit of yours to return." The next one was a threat. She claimed she'd left an expensive necklace, a family heirloom that her grandmother had given her, in my apartment. She said if I didn't return it immediately, she was calling the cops to report me for theft. This was a dumb move on her part. I remembered her bragging to Megan in a text about selling that same necklace 6 months earlier to fund a weekend trip to Vegas. I had the screenshot for that too. I texted her the picture of her own message. "Just sold grandma's necklace, lol. Vegas, here we come." Underneath it, I wrote, "You sure you want to file a false police report? Lying to the police is a serious crime." Total silence after that. For about a week, I heard nothing. I started to think it was finally over. I was wrong. The desperation was just building. And when she couldn't get to me through friends or money, she went for the nuclear option. My family. I got a call from my sister, Laura. Her tone was worried. She said she had just gotten off the phone with Sarah. Sarah had called her, crying hysterically, telling her a completely made-up story about how I had a breakdown, that I had become controlling and abusive, and that I had thrown her out on the street for no reason. She was trying to poison my own family against me. I told her she was full of it, Laura said, which was a relief, but she was convincing. She mentioned that you had been acting erratically and that she was worried about your mental state. What is going on? I was furious. Involving my family was a low blow, even for her. I sent Laura the same 3 screenshots I had sent to Chris. There was a long pause after she read them. Then she just said, "Oh wow, she's a piece of work. Don't worry, I'll handle this." Apparently, Laura called our mom and dad and a few of our cousins and told them the real story. The family circle was secured. Sarah's attempt to paint me as the villain to the people who knew me best had backfired spectacularly. All it did was make her look even more manipulative. 2 weeks to the day after she had walked out of my life with a smirk, my doorbell rang late at night. I checked the camera. It was Sarah, and she looked like she'd been through a war. She was pale, her eyes were swollen from crying, and she was just standing there in the rain. The confident, triumphant woman from 2 weeks ago was gone. In her place was a victim, a role she was born to play. I opened the door but left the security chain on. The second she saw me, she started sobbing. "I made a mistake," she cried. "A huge mistake. I was so stupid. David meant nothing. You were the one who was always there for me, the one who was good to me. I never should have left you. It was a good performance. A year ago, it would have worked. A year ago, I was the guy who avoided confrontation and always gave people the benefit of the doubt. But that guy was gone. Sarah had killed him. "I miss you," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Please, can I just come home?" I let her question hang there in the hallway. I saw the hope in her eyes, the expectation that I would cave, that the nice guy she had taken for granted was still in there somewhere. And I watched that hope die as the seconds ticked by and I said nothing. "No, Sarah," I finally said. The word hit her like a slap. "What?" "This isn't your home," I told her. "And you didn't make a mistake. You made a choice, a very deliberate, planned-out choice. It just didn't work out the way you wanted." The tears stopped instantly. Her face hardened. "You planned this. You wanted him to see those messages. You ruined my life." "I just gave him some information he deserved to have," I said. "He made his own decision. Your plan was to use 2 different people as your personal stepping stones, and now you have no one to stand on. That's not my fault. That's on you." She just stared at me, speechless. She had run out of lies, run out of manipulations, run out of people to blame. "You're only here because your plan failed," I told her. "You don't want me. You want a place to land because you have nowhere else to go. But you're the one who burned the landing strip. Goodbye, Sarah." I closed the door on her shocked face and slid the deadbolt home. I could hear her start to yell, but I just walked away and put on some music. I didn't need to hear it. It was just noise.